This is my house. I said it quietly, but every person at that Thanksgiving table heard me like I'd fired a shot. My son-in-law didn't even look up from the turkey he was carving. My turkey, in my kitchen, with my knives, nobody asked you, old man. He said it the way you'd tell a dog to stay off the couch. I've been cooking since 4 that morning. I want you to understand that before anything else. 4 in the morning, 63 years old. Arthritis in both hands, standing at the counter I'd stood at for 29 years. Cornbread stuffing from scratch. My late wife Patrice's recipe. The one she'd made every November since 1987. I had it memorized the way you memorize a hymn, not from thinking about it, from doing it until it's part of you. Nobody had offered to help. They never did anymore. It hadn't always been this way. 18 months earlier, my daughter called on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was in the garage, sorting through boxes I'd been meaning to sort since I retired from the post office in 2019. 31 years as a mail carrier, then 3 more as a supervisor. My knees quit before my mind did, so I took the package and went home. Dad. Her voice was that particular shape I recognized from when she was 17 and had put a dent in the car. Things have gotten bad. Terrence lost his job. We're 2 months behind on rent. I didn't know who else to call. My daughter, Rochelle, 41 years old, smart as a whip when she wanted to be. Stubborn in ways that used to scare her mother, and now just scared me. She'd married Terrence Biggs 8 years prior at a ceremony I'd paid for at a vineyard outside of Fredericksburg, Virginia. $2,000 for flowers alone. I remember thinking Patrice would have loved it. Patrice had been gone 4 years by then, ovarian cancer, quick and brutal, and I'd spent most of that wedding weekend trying not to cry at things that reminded me of her. Come home, I said. Both of you. Stay until you get back on your feet. I want to be clear about something right now, because I've had 18 months to think about it. I knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, that this was the kind of offer you can't take back. My neighbor Chester Bowman had warned me. Chester's son had moved in temporarily in 2017 and didn't leave until 2021. Once they're in, Chester said, the house stops being yours. I nodded and thought Chester was being harsh. Chester was not being harsh. Chester was not being harsh. They arrived on Friday with a U-Haul and a baby. My granddaughter, Amara, 14 months old, and the most beautiful thing I'd seen since Rochelle herself was born. Taryn shook my hand at the door, firm and grateful. Mr. Elkins, I appreciate this more than I can say. 6 months, tops. I've got leads. Charles Elkins. That's me. Retired, widowed, owner of a 4-bedroom Craftsman on Willowmere Drive in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Paid off in full in 2009. Property taxes current. Gutters cleaned every October. I am the kind of man who keeps records and maintains things, which matters later. Remember that. The first 3 months were fine. Rochelle helped with dishes some evenings. Terrence applied for jobs. I saw the applications on his laptop once when I walked through the living room. He was trying. I gave him credit for that. Month 4, things shifted. Small things at first. The way Terrence started sitting in my armchair instead of on the couch. How he changed the television to sports channels without asking, and left it there. Rochelle reorganized my kitchen cabinets while I was at a doctor's appointment one Tuesday, and told me she'd found a better system. The mug I'd used every morning for 11 years, a blue ceramic one Patrice had bought at a craft fair in Staunton, ended up on a high shelf I needed a step stool to reach. Month 7. I was watching the evening news when Terrence walked in, picked up the remote from the arm of the chair where I'd set it, and changed the channel without a word. I was watching that. Game's on. He didn't look at me. You can watch that stuff on your phone. I am 63 years old. I do not watch things on my phone. Month 10. I overheard Rochelle on the phone with her friend Dominique. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was coming downstairs to get a glass of water, and she was in the hallway, not whispering. I know, she was saying. Living with my dad is killing me. He's always just... Around. It's suffocating. A pause. I know he means well. I went back upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a while. I want to tell you when I stopped excusing it. It was a Sunday in September. I'd spent the afternoon raking leaves in the front yard, then come inside to find Terrence had invited 3 of his friends over. Men I'd met once, maybe twice, and they were sitting in my living room with beers from my refrigerator, shoes on my coffee table. Not their coffee table. Mine. The one Patrice and I had bought at an estate sale in 1998, refinished ourselves in the garage over a long weekend, laughing the whole time because neither of us knew what we were doing. I asked Terrence if he could introduce me to his friends. He said, "Oh, that's just Rochelle's dad. He lives here. He lives here. In his own house." I went to the backyard and sat in the cold for an hour. By the time November came, I had a list in my head that I'd never written down but could recite like a phone number. The money I'd given them. $38,000 total. I tracked it because I am Charles Elkins, and I track things. $12,000 to pay off their back rent before they moved in. $9,000 when Terrence's car needed an engine. $6,000 when Rochelle's dental work came due and they had no insurance. Smaller amounts that added up to another $11,000. Plus the utilities that had doubled since they moved in. Plus the groceries I bought for 4 people on a pension bill for 1. And not once, not a single time in 18 months had either of them said, "When can we repay you, Charles? When can we repay you, Dad? Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Thanksgiving morning. I was up at 4. Stuffing from scratch, the way Patrice made it. Turkey brine since Wednesday, sweet potato casserole, green beans with almonds, cranberry relish I'd made from actual cranberries because Patrice had a rule about that. My hands hurt by 6 o'clock. I kept going. Rochelle came downstairs at 9, poured herself coffee from the pot I'd made, and went back upstairs without saying good morning. Terrence's family arrived, too. His brother Dwayne and Dwayne's wife, 2 cousins, and a friend of Dwayne's I'd never met, named something I couldn't hear clearly over the noise. 7 people. I'd known 6 were coming. The 7th appeared with a case of beer and settled in like he'd been there before. I want you to understand the picture. My house, my table, the big oak one I'd bought in 1995, carried in through the front door with my brother Theodore, who has been gone 11 years now. Sat in the dining room where it has sat through every major meal of my adult life. My china, Patrice's china, white with a blue rim, bought piece by piece over 20 years of Christmases and birthdays. I'd set 12 places. I'd cooked for 12 people, starting before sunrise, standing on arthritic knees alone. Terrence played host like he'd built the place himself. "Dwayne, man, come in. House looks good, right? We've been fixing it up." They hadn't touched a thing except to move my furniture around. "Drinks are in the kitchen." My drinks. I came out of the kitchen carrying the turkey on the platter I'd had since 1992. Every head turned. It was a beautiful bird. 22 pounds. Golden, steaming. Twain said, "Terrence, man, this is incredible." Terrence nodded like he'd been up since 4. "Thanks. Wanted to do it right." I stood in the doorway holding the platter. Nobody looked at me. I set the turkey down. I found my chair. The one at the head of the table. The one where I had sat for 29 Thanksgivings. The one that still had a small burn mark on the left armrest from a candle incident in 2003. And I pulled it out. Terrence's hand came down on my shoulder. Not gently. Actually, Charlie. He only called me Charlie when he wanted something, or when he was about to say something I wouldn't like. "We've got it arranged differently this year. Why don't you grab a spot near the kitchen?" He nodded toward the small chair I used to keep in the corner for extra guests. The folding one. I looked at the folding chair. I looked at my table. I looked at my chair, where Dwayne was, now settling himself down, like he'd done it 100 times. "This is my chair," I said, quietly. "The way you state a fact. I've sat here for 29 years. The room went quiet. Not all at once. Conversations trickled off like a radio being turned down slowly. Amara, sitting in her high chair, kept banging a spoon against the tray. She was the only one who didn't seem to understand that something was happening. Terrence stepped around in front of me. His voice dropped, but not enough. Everyone heard. Look, we've got guests. Can you just not make this a thing? You're embarrassing Rochelle? I'm embarrassing Rochelle. Terrence. I said his name like I was confirming it was still his name. Whose house is this? His jaw tightened. This is our home. We live here. You live here as my guests, I said. Still quiet. And I'm asking you to answer a simple question. Something crossed his face then. Not guilt, not embarrassment. Something colder. He squared his shoulders and said, loud enough that everyone in the room could hear it clearly, Old man, sit where you're told, or go eat in the kitchen. We're trying to have a holiday here. Sit where you're told. I am a 63-year-old man who spent 31 years delivering mail in heat and snow and sleet without complaint, who buried his wife and raised his daughter alone, who wrote a check for $38,000 to keep these people from losing everything. And this man told me to sit where I'm told in my own house. Amara banged her spoon. Clink, clink, clink. I pulled my chair out fully. Sat down. At the head of my table. And I looked at Terrence until he looked away. He didn't say another word right then. He sat in another chair, not the head because I was there. And the conversation slowly restarted, awkward and careful. Rochelle avoided my eyes the entire meal. Dwayne made small talk about football. The friend, whose name I couldn't hear, kept his eyes on his plate. I ate my turkey. I ate the stuffing I'd been making since before any of these people knew my name. After dinner, while Rochelle and Dwayne's wife were in the kitchen, Terrence found me in the hallway. He'd had a few beers. His voice was lower, but his eyes were sharp. You pulled that little stunt on purpose, in front of my family. I sat in my chair. Don't do that again. He pointed at me. Actually pointed, like you'd point at a child. You live in our space now. Act like it. I looked at his finger, then at his face. I said, I think we both know that's not true. He walked away, but I stood in that hallway for a long time. I want to tell you something about what happens when a quiet man reaches his limit. It doesn't look like an explosion. It looks like a decision. That night, I sat at my kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed, and I made some calls in my head. My neighbor Chester, my old supervisor at the post office, a woman named Patricia Marsh, who'd become a real estate attorney after she retired. My brother-in-law Gus, who'd been telling me for 6 months that I needed to do something. I'd been making excuses. They were struggling. Amara needed stability. Family takes care of family. But what I'd heard in that hallway wasn't struggle. That was entitlement. That was a man who'd been given $38,000 in a roof and 3 meals a day looking me in the eye and telling me I lived in his space. Monday morning, I called Patricia Marsh. Charlie, she said, I've been waiting for this call. We met that Wednesday at a coffee shop on Main Street. I brought a folder. 31 months of bank statements, highlighted. Canceled checks with memo lines. Email receipts. Text messages where Terrence had promised to pay it all back once things stabilize. A voicemail from Rochelle from the early months. Dad, this is temporary. We'll take care of you, I promise. Patricia looked through the folder with the careful attention of someone who'd done this many times. No lease agreement? None. They were families staying temporarily. They'll claim tenancy by duration. 31 months is significant in Virginia. Can they win? No. Not with what you have here. She tapped the folder. But Charlie, you need to file an unlawful detainer first. Formal notice. Give them 30 days. I asked about my money. She smiled. Not unkindly. One thing at a time. I went home that evening and wrote the notice myself, with Patricia's template. 30 days to vacate the premises at 1147 Willowmere Drive, Harrisonburg, Virginia. I am the sole owner. This arrangement is terminated. Please confirm receipt. I slid it under their bedroom door that night and sat in my armchair, and watched the news until I fell asleep. The knock on my door came at 7 the next morning. Terrence, still in a t-shirt, holding the paper. What is this? It's a notice to vacate. 30 days. His face went through several colors. You're joking. I'm not a man who jokes about legal documents. We have a baby. It's almost December. I know. 30 days gives you time to make arrangements. Rochelle appeared behind him, Amara on her hip. Her face crumpled when she read the paper over his shoulder. Dad, please. We have nowhere to go. I looked at my daughter. I'd looked at her 1,000 times, the night she was born, her first day of school, standing at her mother's graveside. This was a different look, and she knew it. You have 30 days, Rochelle. I suggest you use them well. Terence crumpled the paper in his fist, literally crumpled it, which told me everything I needed to know about his understanding of legal documents, and said, We're not going anywhere. You want us out. You'll have to call the police. I know, I said. I've already spoken to an attorney. I closed my door gently. The next 4 weeks were not quiet. There were arguments through walls, voices raised past midnight. One evening where Terence threw something in the kitchen. I never found out what, and it made a sound like a plate breaking. Rochelle knocked on my door twice, crying both times, asking if we could just talk. I told her we could talk after the 30 days. That may have been too hard. I don't know. Some nights, I still think about those conversations I didn't have. The morning the 30 days were up, they had not left. I called the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office. 2 deputies arrived at 11. They were professional and patient. I showed them the deed, my name dating to 1995 when I'd bought the place with Patrice, 3 years after we were married. I showed them the notice, served 30 days prior, certified mail confirmation. I showed them Patricia Marsh's letter summarizing the legal situation. The deputies spoke to Terence and Rochelle separately. Terence tried the adverse possession angle. I could hear him through the window. We've lived here 2.5 years. We have rights. One deputy, a younger man with a calm face, said, Sir, adverse possession in Virginia requires 15 years of continuous, exclusive possession, open and hostile. That's not what this is. Rochelle didn't argue. She was already packing. I want to tell you what it looked like when they left. It was a Tuesday in January, cold and gray, ice on the edges of the driveway. Terence loaded the U-Haul with the same things he'd brought in 2.5 years before, plus more. He didn't look at me. Rochelle buckled Amara into the car seat of their Honda, and I stood on the porch, hands in my coat pockets, and she glanced up once. I don't know what my face looked like to her. Amara waved at me from the window as they pulled away. She didn't know what was happening. She just waved the way babies do. I went inside, sat down in my armchair, looked at the room that was mine again. The silence was very loud. The days after were practical. I changed the locks that same afternoon. I'd bought the hardware the week before. I walked through every room, making notes of what needed to be addressed. One of the guest rooms had a hole in the drywall I hadn't known about, behind where their dresser had been. The bathroom off the hallway had mold under the sink, which required a plumber. The carpet in the second bedroom would need to be replaced. I documented everything. Because I am Charles Elkins, and I document things. I called my old friend from the Postal Service, Clarence Webb. He's retired now, too, lives 20 minutes away, comes over for chess on Saturday morning. He came over that first Tuesday evening with a casserole his wife had made and a bottle of bourbon he said was medicinal. We sat at my kitchen table until almost midnight. He let me talk. That's a rare skill in a friend, letting someone talk. You did what you had to do, he said. I keep seeing Amara waving from the car window. You know, that's not your fault. I know that. I just keep seeing it. He poured another inch of bourbon into my glass. You going to go after the money? I hadn't decided yet. I was still in the part where you're just trying to get through the days. Rochelle called 3 times that first week. I answered the second call. She was staying with a college friend in Charlottesville, she said. Terence had an interview. They were managing. Her voice was carefully neutral, the way people sound when they're trying not to ask for something. Amara asks about you, she said. I'd like to see her when things settle. A pause. Dad, I need to ask you something. There it was. I'd been waiting for it. Any chance you could? No, I said, not unkindly, just clearly. Another pause. I understand. We said goodbye and hung up, and I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. I met with Patricia Marsh again in February. I had an updated folder by then, the full accounting, everything organized by date and category. She raised her eyebrows at the total. $62,000, she said. That's documented. There's more I didn't write down. Charlie, that's significant. She set down her pen. With the written communications, the text messages, the voicemail where your daughter says we'll take care of you, that's not a gift. That's a loan with expectation of repayment. In a civil court, you have a very strong case. Will I actually collect anything? That's the harder question. She folded her hands. What are their assets? A 2015 Honda with 2 payments left. Whatever's in a checking account they never let me see. Terrence drives for a rideshare company part-time. Rochelle got a job at a medical billing office last month. Medical billing. Patricia made a note. That's garnishable wages. I filed the civil complaint in March. $62,000 itemized. Both names. They were served at the Charlottesville address. Terrence called me an hour after the service. You're suing your own daughter. His voice had that particular quality of a man who thought he was saying something devastating. I'm suing you both for money I can document I gave you with the expectation of repayment. We were family. You were helping us. You told me I lived in your space, Terrence. You told me to sit where I was told. Family doesn't say that to family. A long pause. You're really doing this. I filed the papers this morning. He called me 3 more things I won't repeat and hung up. The hearing was set for April 14th, Rockingham County General District Court. I drove myself, wore my good suit, the charcoal one I'd bought when I retired, which I'd only worn twice since then. Had breakfast at the diner near the courthouse. Eggs and toast, coffee. Took my time. There was no reason to rush. Terrence had a lawyer, a young man, couldn't have been more than a few years out of school, who argued that the funds were gifts, that there was no written loan agreement, that the text messages and voicemails were expressions of gratitude rather than acknowledgement of debt. He made these arguments with the confidence of someone who hadn't read my folder carefully. Patricia presented the evidence methodically. She was good. 30 years as an attorney after 15 at the post office. She'd seen everything. She put the voicemail transcript on the overhead projector. We'll take care of you. She displayed Terrence's text from February 2023. Mr. Elkins, thank you. We will pay this back when we get on our feet. You have my word. She showed the $12,000 check, written not as a gift, but with a memo line that read, Loan Rental Arrears. The judge was a woman in her mid-50s, with reading glasses and the expression of someone who'd stopped being surprised by human nature a long time ago. She listened without interrupting, asked 2 questions, then removed her glasses. The evidence of expectation of repayment is well documented. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $62,000. Payment structured at $800 monthly, joint and several liability, until the judgment is satisfied. 80 months, 6.5 years. Terrence stared at the table. Rochelle, who had been sitting on the far side of the courtroom, pressed her fingers to her mouth. In the parking lot afterward, she found me in my car. She looked tired in a particular way I recognized. Not the tiredness of one bad night, but the kind that accumulates over months of hard decisions. Dad. She stopped a few feet away. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Talk to you, after everything. I unlocked my car, turned back to face her. Then just say what's true. She led to the ground for a moment. Then, I let him treat you badly. I knew it was wrong, and I stayed quiet because it was easier. That's on me, not him. She looked up. I'm sorry, Dad. Not to get something. Just, I'm sorry. I had thought about this moment. I'd thought about what I'd say, and I'd come up with several versions, some harder than others. What I actually said surprised me a little. I know you are. Is there any chance Amara can still know you? I thought about her waving from the car window. Yes, I said. She can know me. That's separate from everything else. Rochelle nodded. She had her mother's way of accepting hard things with her chin slightly raised, like she was making sure her eyes stayed level. It was the thing that had always reminded me most of Patrice. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. I drove home on I-81 with the radio off and the heat on. The Shenandoah Valley was starting to show green on the hillsides. Early April, the way Virginia does, cautious and hopeful at the same time. I'd driven this stretch of road 1,000 times, to work, from work, to the hospital when Patrice was sick, to the funeral home, to the lawyer's office, to the courthouse. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Of course it was. I was the only one living there now, and I kept things where I put them. I made dinner. Soup from what I had in the refrigerator, nothing special. Ate at my table. Sat one place, which I'd been doing for almost 3 years of widowhood before they arrived, and which felt different now. Not lonely, exactly. More like accurate. Clarence came over that Saturday morning for chess. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the board between us, and I told him about the hearing. He listened, the way he always does, which is fully. 62,000, he said. At $800 a month. That's a long tail. 6.5 years. Think they'll pay? Rochelle will. I moved a pawn. Terence, I'm less sure about. But the liability is joint. If he doesn't pay, she owes the full amount. Clarence studied the board. And the granddaughter? I'm going to see her Saturday week. Rochelle's driving up. He nodded slowly. Good. We played until noon. I won, but not easily. Clarence has gotten better, or I've gotten slower. Hard to tell which, and maybe it doesn't matter. After he left, I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee and looked at the backyard. The maple tree Patrice and I had planted in 1997, the one we'd bought as a sapling from a nursery in Staunton for $14, was starting to bud. It was maybe 30 feet tall now. I've been looking at that tree from this window for 27 years. Some things are exactly where you left them. Some things you have to take back. There's a difference between those two situations, and I'd learned it the hard way, and I wasn't sure I'd call it wisdom yet. Maybe in a few years. Maybe when Amara is old enough to sit at my table and I can tell her this. Your grandfather is a man who kept records and maintained things and loved people as much as he could manage. And when he stopped managing, he stopped. And that was that. I don't think I'll tell her that story for a long time. But I'll be here when it's time. In my house. In my chair. Drinking my coffee. The maple tree outside my kitchen window budded green, and I finished my cup, and I washed it by hand the way I always have, and I set it on the rack to dry. I think about the maple tree a lot these days. Patrice and I bought it as a $14 sapling in 1997 and planted it in the backyard on a Sunday afternoon when neither of us had any idea what we were doing. 27 years later, it's 30 feet tall. You don't grow a tree like that by forcing it. You water it, you leave it alone, you let time do what time do. What time do? What time does. People aren't trees. But the principle isn't entirely different. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand things that cost you something, is that the situation with my daughter and her husband didn't happen because they were bad people who woke up one morning and decided to take advantage of me. It happened because I let small things pass. The first time Terence changed the channel without asking, I let it go. The first time Rochelle reorganized my kitchen and called it a better system, I let it go. Each time I let something go, I was teaching them what was acceptable. By the time Terence told me to sit where I was told, at my own Thanksgiving table, he genuinely believed he had the standing to say it. I had trained him to believe that. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. Not his behavior. Mine. There's a kind of kindness that isn't kindness at all. It looks like generosity, but it's really avoidance. You keep giving, keep accommodating, keep swallowing the thing that bothered you because confrontation feels unkind. I did that for 31 months, and what I got in return wasn't gratitude. It was a man pointing his finger at me in my own hallway, telling me I lived in his space now. The intelligence I wish I'd had earlier is simple. Pay attention to what people show you in the small moments. Not what they say when they need something, what they do when they think it doesn't matter. Terrence showed me who he was in month 4 when he took the remote without a word. I chose not to see it because seeing it would have required me to act, and acting felt hard. But the longer you wait, the harder it gets, and the more it costs you, in money, in dignity, in the years you spend feeling like a stranger in your own home. Rochelle, I'm less certain about, even now. I believe she genuinely didn't see how bad it had gotten. Or maybe she saw it and looked away because looking directly at it would have meant choosing between her husband and her father, and that choice frightened her. I understand that. I don't excuse it, but I understand it. The courage it takes to stand up for what's right inside your own family is a different kind of courage than any other. It costs more. Most people don't find it until the situation forces them to. She's finding it now. That's something. What I know for certain is this. Every action compounds. 31 months of small surrenders became $62,000, and a courtroom and a judge reading my name off a judgment. Every dollar Terrence didn't repay. Every channel he changed. Every time he trained you, he changed. Every time he referred to my house as his space. Those weren't isolated moments. They were a pattern he was building, and I was letting him build it, one quiet concession at a time. The resolution wasn't a moment of triumph. I don't look back on the court date and feel proud. I feel clear. There's a difference. Clarity is what you have when you finally stopped pretending a thing is something other than what it is. I'm 63 years old. I have a house I've maintained for 29 years, a maple tree that took 2.5 decades to become what it is, and a granddaughter who waves from car windows and will sit at my table again someday. That's what I'm working with. That's enough.